The year is 2018, October. A silver Ram 2500 pulls into a long gravel driveway in rural Ohio. The truck has Kentucky plates. It crunches to a stop beside a faded red barn. A woman gets out of the driver's side. Her name is Amelia Hayes. She is the master distiller for Black River Bourbon, one of the fastest-growing distilleries in the country. She looks at the farmhouse. Simple, white, well-kept. An older woman comes out onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. Eleanor Vance. She is 67 years old. She has been farming this land for 45 of them. Amelia walks toward her. She holds out a hand. "Ellie, it's a pleasure. Amelia Hayes." Eleanor shakes it. Her grip is firm. The calluses are real. "I know who you are," she says. "Come on inside." The kitchen smells of coffee and yeast. On the table sits a single document, a lab report from the University of Kentucky's Agricultural Extension. Amelia sits down. Eleanor slides the paper across the worn oak table. Amelia looks at it. She reads the numbers. Protein content, starch content, oil content, trace mineral analysis. Her eyes scan down the columns. Then she stops. She looks at one line. A specific phenolic compound, 4-ethylguaiacol. The number next to it is unlike anything she has ever seen. It's the chemical precursor for spice, for notes of clove and allspice and smoke in aged whiskey. She traces the number with her finger. The kitchen is silent. The only sound is the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. Amelia looks up from the paper. She looks at Eleanor. "Where did you get this corn?" Eleanor smiles, a slow, tired smile that takes a lifetime to earn. "I grew it, right out there." She gestures with her thumb toward the window, toward a field of deep red corn stalks waiting for harvest. Amelia looks back at the paper. She shakes her head slowly. "The co-op down the road said you were a hobby farmer. They said your grain wasn't worth milling. They said it was inconsistent, that it wouldn't sell." Eleanor Vance just looks at her. She doesn't say a word, because she knows something Amelia is just discovering. The difference between being wrong and being dismissed, and the quiet fury it takes to spend a lifetime proving it. This channel is for stories just like that. Stories of people who were told no, who were told they couldn't, who were told it was impossible, and then did it anyway, quietly, without permission. If those are the kinds of stories you believe need to be told, subscribe to this channel. Because what happened on this farm in Ohio, it's a story about more than just corn. It's about who gets to decide what has value, and what happens when one person refuses to accept their answer. Let me tell you about Eleanor Vance. It started in 1973, the year her grandfather died. The year she came home from college with a degree in botany she didn't want to use. She was 22 years old. She inherited the farm, 160 acres, a 1958 John Deere 420 tractor, and a mountain of debt. Her grandfather had been a good farmer, but not a modern one. He saved his own seed. He didn't use the new fertilizers. He believed in crop rotation when everyone else was planting fence row to fence row. The farm was barely breaking even. Eleanor found his journals in a dusty footlocker, page after page of notes, on weather patterns, on soil health, on the seeds he'd been saving for 50 years. He had a specific strain of corn, Bloody Butcher, the old-timers called it. The kernels were the color of a dark red wine, speckled with deep purple. It was an old heirloom variety, open-pollinated, not a hybrid. It didn't have the yield of the new yellow dent corn everyone else was planting. It wasn't as uniform. But her grandfather's notes were obsessive. He wrote about its taste. Rich, nutty, almost savory. He wrote about its resilience. It held on in a drought. It resisted the blight that took his neighbor's crop in '68. In the back of the last journal, he had written a final entry. Ellie, they will tell you this is worthless. They will tell you to buy the new seed, the seed you can't save, the seed that needs their chemicals to grow. They are good men. They are not trying to fool you. They just forgot something. It's not bad grain, it's just different grain. The market only wants one thing. The dirt remembers everything. Eleanor closed the book. She went to the seed shed. There they were. Dozens of burlap sacks filled with the dark red kernels, a legacy in seed form. She made a decision. A quiet decision, made alone in a dusty shed. She would plant her grandfather's corn, all 160 acres of it. She needed a loan to get through the season, for fuel, for parts, for her own food. She went to the Farmers Trust Bank in town. The loan officer was a man named Bill Peterson. He'd known her grandfather for 30 years, played poker with him on Thursdays. He looked at her application. He was kind, he was gentle. Ellie, he said, your grandfather was a fine man, one of the best. But his methods, they were from another time. She pushed a small jar of the bloody butcher corn across his desk. This is what I'm planting. Bill picked it up. He rolled the dark kernels around in his palm. I remember this stuff. Haven't seen it in years. It's beautiful, Ellie. It truly is. But the co-op won't take it. The moisture content is all wrong for their dryers. The kernel size is too inconsistent for their mills. The yield per acre, you won't cover your costs. You can't get a loan to plant a crop you can't sell. She met his eyes. It's good corn, Bill. He sighed, a deep paternal sigh. It's not about good or bad, honey. It's about standard. This isn't standard. I can't in good conscience lend you money to fail. I'm trying to protect you. He slid the application back to her. Denied. She stood up. She took the jar of corn. Thank you for your time, Bill. She walked out of the bank. Into the spring sunshine. Certainty, not cruelty, is always the antagonist. Bill Peterson wasn't a bad person. He was a certain person. He was certain he was helping. Certain he was protecting the legacy of his old friend. Certain he knew what was best. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend. By someone who genuinely believed they were saving you from yourself. Tell me about it in the comments below. Because that kind of refusal, it's the hardest one to fight. You can't fight it with anger. It can only be disproven, and that takes decades. Eleanor went home. She sat at her kitchen table. She looked at her grandfather's journal. The dirt remembers everything. She sold her mother's wedding ring. She sold her grandfather's pocket watch. She sold a small, 5-acre parcel of woods at the back of the property. It gave her just enough cash, $4,300, enough for fuel and repairs, not enough for new parts. The planter plates in her grandfather's old John Deere were sized for modern uniform hybrid seed. The bloody butcher kernels were too big, too varied in shape. They would jam the machine. She couldn't afford new plates, so she went to see her neighbor, a man named Gus. He was a retired mechanic, lived a mile down the road. He saw her pull up. He came out of his workshop, wiping grease from his hands. He saw the look on her face. Bank turn you down? She nodded. He grunted. Figured they might. What's the problem? She explained about the planter plates. Gus walked over to her tractor. He looked at the planter for a long time. He kicked the tires. He spat on the ground. Well, ain't nobody making parts for this old girl anymore, especially not for some crazy corn. Eleanor's heart sank. "But," he said, a glint in his eye, "we can make 'em." For the next 2 weeks, they worked. They took the original plates. They used a drill press and a hand file. Gus taught her how to measure with calipers, how to grind the metal without losing the temper. They widened every single seed slot, by hand, one by one. It was slow, tedious work. Her hands were blistered and raw. At the end of it, he wouldn't take a dime. "Your granddad pulled my truck out of a ditch in the blizzard of '67. Never took a penny. Said a neighbor is a verb. Now get out of here and get that corn in the ground." She planted all 160 acres, the old John Deere chugging along, the modified plates working perfectly. Her neighbors watched. They shook their heads. "Old man Vance's girl. Got his stubborn streak. Planting that Indian corn. She'll lose the farm before Christmas." They weren't being cruel. They were being practical. They were certain. The corn came up. The stalks were thicker than the hybrid corn, the leaves a darker shade of green. By August, it was 8 feet tall. The cobs were forming, deep, blood-red silks hanging from the ends. It was a beautiful crop. It was also a lonely one, a scarlet island in a sea of uniform yellow. Harvest came in October. The yield was lower than her neighbors. She got 90 bushels to the acre. They were getting 120. But her input costs were almost zero. No patented seed to buy, no special fertilizer, no pesticide because the hardy stalks had choked out the weeds. She loaded her old grain truck. She drove it to the Ag Pro Co-op, the center of the farming universe in their county. The manager was a man named Frank Miller. He was 40 years old, president of the town council, coached Little League, a pillar of the community. He came out of the office as she pulled onto the scales. "Well, I'll be. Eleanor Vance. Heard you were planting that old red corn. Didn't believe it." He climbed the side of the truck. He scooped up a handful of kernels. He let them run through his fingers. The color was magnificent. He shook his head. "It's a beautiful thing, Ellie. Really. A piece of history." He sounded genuinely impressed.
"So you'll take it?" she asked.
Frank's smile faded. He looked pained. "Oh, honey, no. I can't take this." "Why not?" He climbed down from the truck. He spoke to her like a patient teacher. "Look, all our grain goes to 2 places, the big feedlots for cattle or the big processors for corn syrup. They have multi-million-dollar machines, calibrated to one thing, number 2 yellow dent corn. This stuff, the moisture is too high for the dryers, it'll clog them up. The oil content is different, it'll throw off the feed mixture. The starch is a different kind of starch, it won't process right." He put a fatherly hand on her shoulder. "It's not bad grain, Ellie. It's just different grain. And we have no market for different. I can't sell it. If I buy it from you, it'll just rot in a silo. I'd be doing you a disservice to give you false hope." She just stared at him. His expression was one of genuine sympathy. He thought he was doing the right thing. He thought he was protecting her. Protecting the co-op. Protecting the system that fed the world. He was certain. "What am I supposed to do with 14,000 bushels of corn, Frank?" He sighed. "You should have planted what everyone else planted. I'm sorry." He walked back to his office. She drove the truck home, unloaded it into her grandfather's old wooden cribs. That was the first rejection, the first harvest, 1974. She survived that winter. She sold half the corn as feed to a few local hog farmers, for pennies on the dollar. They liked it, said the meat was richer, but it wasn't enough. She had to sell another 10 acres of land to pay the property taxes. The next spring she had a choice. Give up. Plant the yellow corn. Join the system. Or try again. She looked at her grandfather's words. The dirt remembers everything. She planted the bloody butcher again. This time, just 80 acres. The rest she put in clover to fix nitrogen in the soil. The neighbors talked. She's doubling down, prideful. She'll learn the hard way. The crop grew. The harvest came. She drove her half-full truck back to the co-op. Frank Miller met her at the scale. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, sad. Ellie, you're not making this easy on yourself. Is it good corn, Frank? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. It's the same corn as last year. My answer is the same as last year. I can't take it. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to be realistic. This is a business, and this corn is not a viable product. He didn't even climb the truck this time. He just waved her off the scale. She drove home. That was the second rejection, the second harvest. 1975. Frank Miller drove past her farm later that week. He saw her, alone, shoveling the red corn into the cribs. He felt a pang of something. Not guilt, not pity. Something closer to validation. He felt certain he had done the right thing by refusing her. He was saving her from a bigger failure down the road. He was the witness who watches. And what he saw was a woman struggling against an immovable reality. He was sure of it. That winter was harder. She sold a little more to the hog farmers. She leased some pasture to a cattleman. She ate a lot of venison and beans. She thought about quitting every single day. The loneliness was the worst part. Not the physical loneliness. The loneliness of believing in something nobody else could see. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. Spring of 1976 arrived. She was down to her last few $100s. This was it. One more try. She planted 40 acres of the bloody butcher. The other fields lay fallow. She poured everything into that one plot of land. She weeded by hand. She cultivated with the old John Deere. The crop was the best she'd ever grown. The ears were heavy on the stalks. The color was deeper than ever. The harvest came. A perfect, crisp October day. She knew it was pointless, but she had to do it. She loaded the truck. She drove to the co-op. The third time. Frank was in the office. He saw her pull onto the scale. He didn't come out. He sent his young assistant, a boy of 19. The boy walked up to her window. He couldn't look her in the eye. Mr. Miller says he's sorry. He can't buy your corn. He says you know the reasons why. The boy looked down at his boots. He was embarrassed. Eleanor just nodded. She didn't say a word. She put the truck in gear, drove off the scale, and didn't look back. That was the third rejection, the third harvest. 1976. She went home. She sat at her kitchen table. She looked out at the 40 acres of red corn standing in the field. A failure. A beautiful, perfect failure. That night, she decided to sell the farm. She would call the realtor in the morning. It was over. She had lost. The kind, certain men had been right all along. But that's not the end of the story. Because this is where the story becomes bigger than one farm in Ohio. That winter, a writer for a small magazine called Hearth and Home was doing a story. A story on struggling family farms. He heard about the woman planting the strange red corn. He came out to interview her. He was captivated by the story, by her quiet determination, by the beauty of the grain. He took a photograph of her, standing in her barn, a mountain of rejected red corn behind her. The article was published in the spring of 1977, a small piece, buried in the back of the magazine. Most people never saw it, but one person did. a man named Alistair Finch. He owned a small artisanal grist mill in North Carolina. He milled flour for chefs. He was obsessed with flavor. He read the article. He looked at the picture of the corn. He picked up the phone. Eleanor answered. Her voice was tired. The farm was already listed for sale. He said, "My name is Alistair Finch. I read about your corn." He paused. "I think you're growing exactly what I've been looking for." She was silent. He said, "I want to buy it. All of it. How much do you have?" She did the math in her head. From the last 3 years, almost 20,000 bushels. He didn't hesitate. "I'll pay $1.50 a bushel, plus shipping." The co-op was paying 95 cents for yellow corn. Eleanor sat down. She couldn't speak. "Are you still there?" he asked. Yes, I'm here." That one phone call changed everything. She took the farm off the market. She hired a truck. She spent a week loading her 3 years of failure and shipped it to North Carolina. The check that came back saved the farm, and then some. Let me tell you about the next 40 years. By 1980, she was planting all 160 acres again, all of it under contract to Alistair Finch. Cash. By 1985, she bought the neighboring 80 acres from a farmer who was retiring, paid for it in cash. She started experimenting, saving the seed from the hardiest stalks, the ones with the deepest color, the best flavor. She was no longer just a farmer. She was a breeder. Frank Miller at the co-op would see the trucks coming and going, not his trucks, long-haul trucks from out of state. He'd hear the talk in town. Ellie Vance is getting $3 a bushel now, $5. He didn't understand it. It didn't fit his model. It wasn't efficient. It wasn't standard. He watched from a distance, the witness, confused. By 1990, the demand was more than her farm could handle. Alistair's flour was winning awards. Chefs were calling it the most flavorful cornmeal in America. Eleanor started talking to her neighbors, the same ones who had called her prideful. Many were struggling. Debt was high. Commodity prices were low. She made them an offer. "Grow my corn. I'll give you the seed for free. I'll guarantee you a price double what the co-op pays." A few of them, the ones closest to bankruptcy, said yes. That year, 5 farms in the county planted Bloody Butcher corn. By 1995, it was 20 farms. They delivered their harvest not to the co-op, but to a new set of grain bins Eleanor had built on her property, paid for in cash. She had become her own co-op, the co-op of the rejected, the ones who chose flavor over yield, difference over sameness. By 2005, her operation covered over 2,000 acres across the county. She was growing other heritage grains now, Turkey red wheat, Wren's Abruzzi rye, each with a story, each with a unique flavor, each rejected by the commodity system. She was 60 years old. She had never taken a loan from a bank again. Everything was built on the profit from the year before, cash. Frank Miller was still managing the Ag Pro Co-op. It was smaller now. Many of the local farms had been bought up by corporations. The ones that were left were struggling. He saw Eleanor at the diner sometimes. She would nod at him, politely. He would nod back. He never said the words, "I was wrong." He couldn't. His certainty was a fortress, and he was still living inside it. Then came the drought of 2012, the worst in 50 years. The hybrid yellow corn, bred for perfect conditions and chemical inputs, withered. The stalks were stunted, the ears were small and malformed. Yields were down by 60%. Farmers who had massive loans for land and equipment. They were ruined. The co-op was facing a catastrophe. But Eleanor's fields were different. The bloody butcher corn, with its deep roots and genetic diversity, held on. The yield was down, but only by 20%. It was battered, but it survived. It had resilience bred into it over centuries. The dirt remembered drought, and the seed did too. That October, a black pickup truck drove down Eleanor's long gravel drive. It was Frank Miller. He looked old, tired. He got out of the truck. Eleanor was on her porch. She watched him come. He stood at the bottom of the steps. He took off his hat. Ellie. He cleared his throat. The feedlots are desperate. You'll take anything. The co-op. We're short on our contracts. We need corn badly. He looked at her fields of healthy red corn. I was wondering if you had any you could sell us. The moment hung in the air. 40 years of doubt, of quiet dismissal, of kind paternal certainty. It all came down to this. Here he was, the gatekeeper, asking for entry. Eleanor looked at him. She felt no triumph, no anger, just a deep, quiet sadness for the time that had been lost, for the respect that had been withheld. She could have destroyed him, could have said no, could have reminded him of the 3 harvests he rejected. But she didn't. Her answer was quiet and devastating in its simplicity. I sell all my corn on contract, Frank. Have for years. I don't have any extra. Then she added one more thing. It's not bad grain. It's just different grain. You told me yourself you have no market for different. She didn't say it with malice. She said it as a fact he had created. Frank Miller just stood there. He put his hat back on. He nodded. He understood. The world he had been so certain of no longer existed, and he had been left behind. He walked back to his truck and drove away. That was the reckoning. Not a shout, but a quiet truth, spoken on a porch in October. The story could end there, but it doesn't, because a legacy is about what happens next. Amelia Hayes, the distiller from Kentucky, did more than just read a lab report in 2018. She signed a contract, a 10-year contract for Eleanor's corn. The bourbon she made from it was called Vance's Folly. It won double gold at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition in 2021. The tasting notes mentioned a unique, spicy character, a hint of clove and allspice, a flavor nobody could replicate, because nobody else had Eleanor's corn. The co-op Frank Miller ran was sold to a national conglomerate in 2015. He retired. Eleanor Vance did not. In 2019, she used the profits from the Bourbon contract to create something new, the Heritage Grain Trust. It's a nonprofit. It provides free seed to young farmers who want to grow non-standard grains. It offers interest-free loans for equipment. It has its own mill, its own distribution network. It is a system built for the ones the other systems reject. Her first scholarship recipient was a young woman from Appalachia. She wanted to grow a rare white corn used for grits. The banks had laughed at her. Eleanor Vance wrote her a check and gave her a phone number to a chef in Charleston who was waiting for that exact corn. She created a new map, connecting the forgotten seeds with the people who were searching for them. Today, Eleanor is in her 70s. She still lives in the same white farmhouse. She still drives the back roads in her old Ford pickup. On her kitchen windowsill, there is a small mason jar. It's filled with the dark red kernels of bloody butcher corn. From the 1974 harvest. the first rejection. Sometimes she picks it up. She holds it up to the light, a physical artifact of a quiet fight. A reminder that the most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who believes they are protecting you. The world is full of kind, decent people who are certain about what is possible and what is not. They manage our banks. They run our co-ops. They sit on our school boards. They are not villains. They are the guardians of the way things are. Their certainty is a wall. And right now, somewhere in the world, a young person with a new idea is standing in front of that wall. They are being told, kindly, that it can't be done, that it's not practical, that it's for their own good. This story is for them. The story of Eleanor Vance is proof. Proof that you don't have to tear down the wall. You just have to find the one person who needs what's on your side, and then build a gate. What was the wall someone built for you out of kindness? Let us know in the comments. And if this story reminded you of someone who is fighting a quiet battle, someone who is being told no for their own good, share this video with them. Let them know they are not alone. The dirt remembers everything. Thanks for watching.